"You need a wife, and I need a dad," whispered the little girl to the giant cowboy, and he slowly turned around. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The sun was sinking behind the wide Texas plains, turning the sky into a canvas of gold and crimson. The dusty road that led to Cedar Valley stretched far and lonely, where the wind carried the scent of dry grass and distant rain. In that silence, the world felt both empty and endless, a place where broken hearts came to disappear. Cole McCall had lived in that silence for 6 long years. Folks around town called him the giant cowboy, partly because of his height, 6'6" in worn-out boots, but mostly because of the way he carried his grief. He'd lost his wife, Emily, and their baby girl in a carriage accident just outside of Amarillo. Since then, he'd spoken little, smiled less, and let the world shrink to the boundaries of his ranch. People whispered that Cole wasn't cruel, just hollow. He kept to his cattle, his whiskey, and his horses. He'd come into town maybe once a month, pay for supplies in cash, nod once, and leave. He never lingered. He never looked back. But that day, that one strange, ordinary day, everything changed. Sarah Harper ran the only general store in Cedar Valley. She was a widow too, though her grief was quieter, tucked behind tired eyes and a brave smile. Her husband had died in the mines up north when their daughter, Lizzie, was only 3. Life had taught Sarah to keep moving, no matter how heavy her heart felt. Lizzie was 8 now, all sunshine and mischief, with a tangle of blonde curls and eyes too wise for her age. She loved helping her mama at the store, chatting with customers, and listening to the traveling stories told by ranchers and cowhands. That afternoon, a storm was brewing in the distance. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the air smelled of wet dust. Sarah told Lizzie to stay close while she finished counting inventory. But Lizzie, curious as always, followed the sound of a distant whistle. A wild colt had broken free near the fields behind the store. Barefoot, she ran through the tall grass, chasing the horse until she crossed the boundary fence that marked the edge of the McCall ranch. Cole was out riding when he saw her, a tiny figure running after the colt, her laughter echoing through the open land. He slowed his horse, watching in disbelief. Children didn't come near his land. They were warned not to. But this one didn't seem afraid. Then she tripped. Cole's horse galloped forward before he even realized what he was doing. Dust flew as he pulled the reins, jumped down, and helped her up. She wasn't hurt, just startled and covered in dirt. "Easy there, kid," he said, his voice deep and gravelly, unused to speaking kindly. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Lizzie blinked up at him. He looked enormous. Broad shoulders, sun-browned skin, eyes like weathered steel under the brim of his hat. She didn't seem scared, just curious. "You're the giant cowboy," she said matter-of-factly. "Mama says you don't talk to anyone." Cole frowned slightly. "Your mama talks too much. She only says you're sad," Lizzie added. "I think sad people just need someone to talk to." He didn't know what to say to that. The wind picked up, brushing through the grass like whispers from another life. Lizzie looked at him, really looked, the way children do when they see something adults have long forgotten. And then, in that small, trembling voice, she said it, "You need a wife and I need a dad." Cole froze. The world around him seemed to stop. He turned slowly, as though afraid the moment might shatter. "What did you just say?" he asked quietly. "You heard me," Lizzie replied, with that simple, stubborn certainty only a child could have. "Mama works too much. She's lonely. You're lonely too. I can tell. You look like someone who used to smile." He couldn't find his breath. For the first time in years, something inside him, something he thought was buried forever, stirred. Sarah's voice echoed from the distance. "Lizzie, where are you?" Lizzie waved and shouted, "Over here, Mama!" Sarah came running across the field, her skirt catching the wind, worry painted across her face. When she saw who stood beside her daughter, she stopped cold. "Mr. McCall," she said, breathless. "I'm so sorry if she's been a bother." Cole shook his head. "No bother." His voice was softer than she'd expected. Sarah's eyes met his for the first time, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of two souls that had both lost too much. She thanked him, took Lizzie's hand, and turned to leave. But before they walked away, Cole said quietly, "It's gonna rain. Let me ride you two home." It wasn't a request. It was instinct, the kind of kindness he hadn't shown in years. That short ride back to town was silent but strange in its comfort. The rain came down steady, soaking the land, the smell of earth thick in the air. Cole dropped them off at the store's porch, tipping his hat before riding away. Sarah watched him go, her heart oddly unsettled. Lizzie waved after him.
"Bye, Dad,"
she called out, loud and unashamed. Sarah gasped, embarrassed, but Cole didn't turn around, not then. Not until he was far down the road, where no one could see the single tear that had found its way down his cheek. That night, the storm broke fully over Cedar Valley. The thunder rolled, and the rain washed everything clean. Cole sat by his window, the firelight flickering against the scars of old pain. In his mind, he kept hearing that small, trembling voice. "You need a wife, and I need a dad." He didn't sleep. The next morning, Sarah woke to find a small wooden box on her store's porch. Inside were two horseshoes polished and engraved with care, and a note in tidy handwriting, "For your daughter's colt. He's been found safe, Cole McCall." From that day on, he began to stop by the store more often. Sometimes to buy nails or rope, other times just to return a borrowed crate that Sarah didn't remember lending. Each visit was awkward but gentle, like a man relearning how to live. Lizzie took to him immediately. She'd chatter endlessly, asking about ranch life, horses, and what it felt like to lasso a steer. Cole would listen quietly, occasionally cracking the faintest smile. Sarah noticed how his eyes softened when Lizzie spoke, how his hands, rough from work, seemed gentler around her. One afternoon, Lizzie drew a picture of the three of them. Her mama and Cole, standing under a big Texas sun. She gave it to him shyly. He looked at it for a long time, tracing the crayon lines with his thumb. "You drew me taller than everyone else," he said. "Because you're the giant cowboy," she giggled. "And giants protect people." For a moment, he couldn't speak. As the weeks turned to months, the town began to notice the change. The once silent rancher was seen helping fix the store's porch, delivering firewood before the winter, and even laughing once in a while. Folks whispered again, this time with smiles. But Cole carried a secret weight. He still visited the small grave on the hill where his wife and child lay. He'd talk to them quietly about how life felt different now. "There's this little girl," he'd say, kneeling in the grass. "She reminds me that I'm still human." Sarah saw him one evening, standing there in the rain, hat in hand, head bowed. She didn't speak, just placed a hand on his arm. For the first time, he didn't pull away. When winter came, Cedar Valley was dusted white with snow. The nights grew long and cold, and the store stayed open late for travelers. One evening, a storm hit harder than expected. The wind howled and the lamps flickered. Sarah was closing up when the door burst open. Cole stood there, covered in snow. "Roads are blocked," he said. "Mind if I waited out here?" She nodded. "Of course." "There's coffee on the stove." Lizzie, wrapped in a blanket, came running. "I knew you'd come," she said, beaming. "You always do." Cole chuckled softly. "Guess I do." That night they shared stories, real ones, raw ones. Sarah told him about her husband, how she'd survived the years alone. Cole spoke about Emily, about the guilt he'd carried since that day. The more they talked, the lighter the air became, as though the walls themselves were letting go of sorrow. When Lizzie finally drifted off to sleep on the couch, Sarah looked at Cole and said, "She really thinks the world of you." "You know," he met her eyes. "She saved me," he said simply. The fire crackled between them. Something warm and fragile lingered in that silence. Not love yet, but the memory of what love could be. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that small store, three broken hearts began to heal together, and that, friends, was how a little girl's innocent words reached into the heart of a man who'd forgotten how to live. How the giant cowboy finally turned around, not just toward her, but toward life again. Winter faded slowly from Cedar Valley, leaving behind soft mud, the first hints of green, and a quiet that felt like renewal. The days stretched longer, and the smell of spring carried through the valley. Rain on soil, horses in the pasture, and something new stirring in the air that neither Sarah nor Cole could quite name. Since that stormy night at the general store, things between them had begun to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but like dawn breaking after a long, cold night. Cole found himself visiting more often, sometimes to fix a leaky roof tile, sometimes to bring firewood, and sometimes with no reason at all. Sarah stopped pretending she didn't notice. Lizzie, of course, noticed everything. She had a way of seeing what grown-ups tried to hide. She'd grin whenever Cole walked in, and she'd whisper to her mother, "He came back again. Mama, he likes you." Sarah would hush her, but her cheeks would turn pink just the same. One warm afternoon, Cole was helping mend the store's back fence. Lizzie sat nearby, drawing with chalk on the wooden planks, humming to herself. Sarah came out with lemonade, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, sunlight glinting off her freckles. Cole looked up, watching her for a moment longer than he meant to. She caught his gaze and smiled shyly. "You've done a lot for us," she said softly. "You don't have to keep helping." He took the glass from her hand, his rough fingers brushing hers. "Maybe I want to," he said. Something unspoken lingered there, gentle, uncertain but real. That evening, after the sun dipped low, Sarah watched Cole ride away again. Lizzie leaned against her arm and whispered, "He's part of us now, isn't he?" Sarah didn't answer, but in her heart she already knew the truth. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life settled into something new. Cole began inviting them to the ranch, at first for simple things, like helping with a sick calf or picking peaches from the old orchard that hadn't been touched in years. Lizzie loved it there. She'd run through the tall grass, braid flowers into the horses' manes, and make up stories about giants and angels. One day, as the three of them sat by the creek, Lizzie pointed to the sky. "See that?" she said. "That's where Daddy and Mrs. Emily live. I think they're friends now." Cole's breath caught. Sarah reached out, gently resting her hand over his. "She talks to her father like that sometimes," she said softly. Cole nodded, voice rough. "Maybe she's right. Maybe they are." He looked at Sarah then, really looked, and for the first time she didn't look away. That spring, Cedar Valley came alive. The annual town fair arrived, bright banners, laughter, the scent of popcorn and roasted corn filling the air. Lizzie begged both of them to go together. Sarah hesitated, but Cole agreed before she could object. The fair was simple but beautiful. Music playing, families gathered, the sky glowing in orange and pink. Lizzie pulled them everywhere, to the Ferris wheel, the pie contest, even the dancing stage. Cole stood awkwardly at first, hat in hand, until Lizzie tugged him forward. "You have to dance, Cowboy!" Sarah laughed. "You don't have to if you don't want to." Cole smirked faintly. "Oh, I want to." He stepped closer, hand out. The band struck up a slow tune, an old country waltz, soft and familiar. They moved slowly, uncertain at first, but then found the rhythm together. Around them the world faded. For those few minutes it was just them, two souls who had once given up on love, moving as if they'd known each other forever. When the song ended, the applause from nearby couples startled them both back to reality. Sarah blushed, laughing softly. Cole tipped his hat. "Guess I still remember a few steps." Lizzie clapped her hands. "You two are perfect." People in town saw them that night, and whispers spread like wildfire about the giant cowboy who danced, about the widow who made him smile again. But with every new beginning, shadows sometimes follow. A few weeks later, a man rode into Cedar Valley, sharp suit, city accent, the kind of man who didn't belong to the dust and wind. He introduced himself as Mr. Howard Briggs, a land broker from Dallas. He came to Sarah's store one morning, flashing papers and a polished smile. "Mrs. Harper," he said smoothly, "the railway expansion is coming through this valley. The company's interested in purchasing properties near the line, including your store." Sarah's stomach dropped. "This store's all I have," she said. Briggs leaned closer. "And I can make sure you walk away well off. You and your daughter could start fresh somewhere better, somewhere bigger." She refused, of course, but he didn't give up easily. Over the next week, letters came, offers rose, and rumors began to spread that the railway company might force small owners out if they didn't sell. When Cole heard, he rode straight into town, dust swirling behind his horse. He stormed into the store, fists clenched. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah looked up from the counter, surprised. "It's my problem, Cole. You don't have to—" "Your problem is my problem now," he said firmly. Lizzie, sitting by the window, watched them quietly. She didn't understand all the grown-up words, but she understood fear, the kind that crept into her mama's eyes at night. Cole spent the next few days riding between ranchers, gathering signatures, uniting the townsfolk to fight the buyout. The giant cowboy who once kept to himself became their voice, steady, fierce and unyielding. The day the company's men came to stake land, they found Cole waiting at the fence line with half the town behind him. He stood tall, coat flapping in the wind, eyes blazing with defiance. "You lay one stake here, and you'll have to go through all of us." The men backed down. That night, Cedar Valley celebrated. Music, laughter, gratitude filling the air. Sarah watched Cole from across the crowd, pride welling in her chest. When he finally walked over, she whispered, "You saved us." He shook his head. "You saved me first." Under the starlight, she kissed him, gentle, hesitant, but full of everything they'd both held back for so long. From that night, they were no longer just friends. They were something deeper, a promise, unspoken but understood. Lizzie took it as official. "Does that mean you're my dad now?" she asked one morning at breakfast. Cole smiled. "I guess it does, sweetheart." She jumped into his arms, laughing. "I knew it." For months, peace returned to their lives. Cole began rebuilding the old ranch house, adding new rooms, fixing what had long been broken. Sarah and Lizzie moved in during the summer, their laughter filling halls that had once been silent. But life, as it often does, wasn't done testing them. Late one evening, while Cole was out rounding cattle, a sudden fire broke out in the barn. Lightning had struck during a passing storm. By the time he saw the glow, flames had already swallowed the structure. He rushed in, shouting for his horses. Sarah and Lizzie from the porch screamed his name. Smoke and heat choked the air. He freed 2 horses before the roof began to give. Then he heard a faint cry, one last foal trapped behind the gate. Without hesitation, he went back in. The barn collapsed just as he emerged, carrying the trembling foal. Flames licked his sleeve, but he didn't stop until he'd laid the animal down safely outside. Sarah ran to him, tears streaming. "You could have died." He coughed, eyes red from the smoke. "Couldn't leave them. They're family." That night, as she bandaged his burns, Sarah whispered, "You always save others, Cole. Maybe it's time someone saved you." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You already did." Months passed and the ranch came alive again. They rebuilt together this time, Sarah painting, Lizzie planting flowers, Cole fixing fences. The seasons turned. One crisp autumn morning, they rode out together, the 3 of them, into the open fields, golden with sunrise. Lizzie's laughter echoed across the hills as she raced ahead on her pony. Sarah leaned into Cole, her hand resting over his. "Funny," she said quietly. All it took was one sentence from a little girl. He smiled. "You need a wife and I need a dad," he repeated softly. "Didn't think words that small could change a man's whole life." She looked at him, tears shining. "They changed mine too." Years later, when folks in Cedar Valley told stories around the fire, they always spoke of the giant cowboy, the man who'd lived alone until a little girl reminded him what love sounded like. They said that sometimes, when the wind was just right, you could still hear her laughter on the breeze, echoing across the plains. It wasn't just a story of love. It was a story of healing, of finding family where you least expect it, of second chances written in dust and starlight. And as the sun set once more over the wide Texas horizon, Cole McCall, the giant cowboy, looked at his family and finally whispered what he'd carried in silence for years. "I'm home."